I'm Natalie.
And I'm Ben.
And today we have made 5 different cookie doughs, not all for eating, but as a science experiment, we are trying to see the effects that different types of sugar have on a cookie. Okay, so now we're going to look at the kinds of sugar that we used. So we're going to start with our control. So we just use regular standardized baking sugar. It's extra fine granulated sugar. Okay, the next kind of sugar that we use is muscovado sugar. This is the rarest type of sugar. Most people haven't seen it before. It's really dark. A lot of molasses is left, so there are a lot of chunks. Okay, the third type of sugar that we use is coconut sugar. It's darker than normal sugar, but it's finer than like brown sugar per se. So it's made out of the sugar of a coconut, so it's darker and it tastes kind of like coffee almost.
Next, we have brown sugar. It is a higher molasses content than the standard baking sugar, but it has a much lower molasses content than muscovado.
And last of all, we have Sweet and Low. Sweet and Low is not actual sugar. It's, if you've ever seen the packets in a coffee shop or something of the artificial sweeteners that are like low calorie, for instance, it kind of has the aftertaste of Diet Coke, the chemical aftertaste of that. Hi, okay, so we baked all of our cookies. They're here right now, they're all very beautiful. I'm really looking forward to tasting all of them. Except for maybe the Sweet and Low, that might be really gross. Okay, so the first one we're trying is the baking sugar. Is the baking sugar, which is our control. They were all cooked for a set time of 8 minutes. So I took them out at 8 minutes, meaning they're cooked, but some of them are more burnt, like the control. You can see they're burnt around the edges. And then some of them aren't as cooked. Okay, so next, muscovado sugar. This is our darkest cookie.
Much more chewy than the other one and much less crispy.
It also has like a caramely flavor more.
Yeah.
Like it seems like more molassesy and caramely.
Yeah.
I think that's the sugar. It's also a lot darker. It looks kind of like coffee colored.
Also, the texture is kind of powdery.
Yeah, and it's a little bit like chewier and thicker.
Yeah.
Fluffier too.
Yeah. It's also a richer flavor.
Yeah, I like it. I've never tried muscovado sugar. Okay, so our next one is coconut sugar. These are bigger and they are crispier. So
It has that dark flavor of the muscovado, but
it's really coffee-like almost.
yeah.
Kind of has a hint of like coffee.
Yeah, it's much more crispy and less fluffy, but it still has that kind of sandy texture.
Definitely. I really like the coconut sugar. So.
Yeah, it's good.
Okay, next we have brown sugar. So these are smaller for some reason. I feel like the person behind the camera who made these cookies made them smaller.
Still crisp, just like the control. They're very crispy around the edges, but it's more actually. Anyway, it has
it's a little bit fluffier.
Yeah, it's probably because it's been compact more because
just of the bigger sugar size, the crystal size.
If it was flattened more, it would be probably flatter and crispy.
No, because they were the same height when they were put in the oven. It's kind of like right in between control and muscovado, I think.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of hint of caramel, but it's not really dominant.
Yeah.
Okay, so our last one is Sweet and Low. I'm not very excited about this. I'm worried. It seems like the dough is really rubbery, and I feel like when we flatten these out to put in the oven, they like sprung back up because they're like really tiny.
Yeah, I remember these going in flat, but
they were a lot bigger when they were put in the oven. So yeah. Let's see.
Where's the trash can? Oh. Sparkling rubber.
Oh my god, this is the grossest thing I've ever tasted in my life. Okay.
Alright, time to eat all the other cookies. Get that out of my mouth.
Okay. That is the single grossest thing I've ever tasted in my life.
You want
That tasted kind of like Lifesavers, almost like minty, but like gross. It kind of tastes like Diet Coke as well, like the aftertaste, like it tastes kind of chemical.
Yeah, yeah.
It was really bitter. It was really bitter too. I don't think I'll ever think of Sweet and Low the same.
Yeah, no, this.
That was the single worst thing I've ever tasted in my life. Okay, so we've just done a really fun experiment. But now it's time to see the actual science behind it. Okay, so first let's talk texture. So sugar affects the texture of a cookie, obviously. But the way that it affects a cookie is that sugar cuts through the dough of the cookie like a tiny little knife, if you can just imagine that. So that would mean that the bigger the crystal, the more knifey it is, I guess. And the knife through the dough creates little air bubbles in its wake. And so if you think about the bigger the crystal, that would mean the bigger the air bubbles in your cookie. So that would in turn make a bigger crystal of sugar more fluffy of a cookie. So in order to really understand how sugar affects a cookie, you have to understand what affects a cookie besides sugar as well. So the first thing that affects a cookie while it's in the oven is emulsification, which is when an emulsion, in this case butter, and butter is an emulsion because it's two ingredients that don't want to stay together, which is, in this case, is water and fat with dairy solids to keep them together. But at 96 degrees, when the butter melts, meaning the fat melts, the water is released and turns into steam, which then pushes up at the edges of the cookie because steam wants to rise and makes the cookie fluffy. So that is why butter is really important to these cookies. Okay, now let's talk about the Maillard reaction. So the Maillard reaction, I think I'm pronouncing that right, is when sugar molecules break down and form and rearrange themselves, forming ring-like structures that reflect light. And so that makes the cookie brown. So that colored cookie that you're looking for, that's when it happens. The last reaction that a cookie undergoes while it's in the oven is caramelization. Caramelization is when sugar compounds break down. So this is really sugary. And so this is going to change based on what sugar is in your cookie. So it's when sugar breaks down and creates that sweet, nutty, caramely flavor. And so some cookies have more of that and some cookies have less. It doesn't even start until 356 degrees, which means that if your oven is preheated to 350, as most ovens are, except for in this case, our oven was preheated to 400, but usually 350, it won't even happen. So, I mean, most things won't have caramelization in them. So you saw Ben and I gag over the Sweet and Low cookies because Sweet and Low isn't actually sugar. And that makes up for more than just taste. It felt weird, it was totally different than regular sugar. And that because Sweet and Low isn't sugar, so it doesn't have the same molecular makeup. So it doesn't go through the Maillard reaction because there are no sugar proteins to rearrange. So how does artificial sweeteners actually affect a cookie? Well, we don't really know what's in the artificial sweetener. There was no ingredients list, it was kind of weird. So we don't know. In conclusion, we have conducted a really fun experiment and our results were pretty great. I think that the Sweet and Low didn't work at all because it wasn't sugar. So all of the molecular compounds, everything was just totally different. So we didn't really know what was happening. And each of the other 4 sugars, they produce a kind of similar cookie because they're all sugar. So the reactions were the same, but the flavor profiles were really different because the sugars came from different places. So I think the results were really great, and I love this experiment. So thank you guys.